It's time to spill
the tea.
Hello!
You there, and welcome to
A Spoonful of
Theatre.
And this is another one of our Spill the Tea episodes where we review a piece of Singapore theatre from right outside the foyer. I'm TJ, theatre director and practitioner.
And I'm Sam, a teacher of language, literature, and self-proclaimed show business luvvy.
Now, where are we currently, Sam?
We are currently outside the Victoria Theatre on a beautiful Sunday afternoon, now that the rain's gone anyway.
And what performance have we seen?
We have just seen A Doll's House, Part 2. Now, a thing about the Part 2, this is the unofficial sequel to Henrik Ibsen's A Doll's House, first produced in the late 19th century. Now, have you seen A Doll's House by Ibsen?
Actually, I haven't. It's this text I know nothing about.
And neither have I.
And it's very interesting because actually, even in the program notes, it does say, of course you know Henrik Ibsen's 1879 masterwork, and actually I have a feeling that most of the Singapore audience probably don't know the 1879 masterwork.
Do you know what? Let's address the elephant in the room straight off the bat, because there has been a lot of emphasis in not having seen Part 1 originally in the marketing and PR. Now, that for me reveals two things. One, I imagine that they have been asked this question constantly. Do I need to have seen the original Doll's House by Ibsen? Do I need to have seen the Part 1, etc., etc.? And it shows that they've had to put a lot of energy into clarifying that answer. Energy that could have been used elsewhere in really promoting and championing the show. But it also reveals something else. It also reveals something of audience psychology, especially now in 2025, where we are in the streaming generation. That audiences may be unwilling to gauge with a Part 2 unless they really know about the Part 1. And as an audience member, if I was to give my first thoughts here, I felt the audience were constantly playing catch up for context. And that's where I am.
I'll be honest that I actually don't think I needed to see Part 1. I think I got the story on its own. I think, there are many movies and many examples of shows that you can see that, you can jump straight in. It's like, you're watching episodes of Friends and you don't necessarily need to have seen the first two seasons and you can still enjoy the characters. So for me, I would say that I do agree with them that necessarily you don't have to have seen Part 1, and I got that she'd left and she was coming back. But it would have been nice to know a little bit more of the story, and when I did read the program and found out a bit more about it, it gave some even wider context to it. But I mean, the revival did do very well on Broadway, and it did do very well in 2019, won many Tony Awards. But I think that's in America, where maybe this play is a bit more known, perhaps, and maybe audiences are a bit more aware of the original. I have a feeling in Singapore that maybe people are not at that same place, and I think we've got to acknowledge that coming into that we are, like you say, playing catch up a little bit by watching this play. So with all that in mind, let's think about this particular production, Sam. So what did we think about the performances? Let's jump right in with the performances.
The performances, they came off very well. There was energy between the different actors. Someone who really stood out for me was Swee Lin, who plays Anne-Marie. She really gave it a lot of energy, and she got the most laughs throughout the entire performance. And yeah, she was a real big highlight for me. What about you, TJ?
So this is a cast of some really big hitters in Singapore theatre land, who I've seen in many different works across the years, and who are absolutely excellent performers. But if I'm truly honest, I feel like the play played them and they didn't play the play. If I'm truly honest. And I think where that, for me, really shone, and I don't know if you felt the same, I felt like, because it was a very wordy play, because there's only 4 characters, and often the scenes, we just watched Last 5 Years where there was just 2 people on stage, and often there was just 2 people on stage in this show, but bless Jo, she is on there the entire time, which is an absolute, that is very hard to do, to hold that space for that whole time. But the big thing that I felt just affected the play for me was actually the vocal life of the performance. And the way I'm going to frame it is, it felt like we were watching a BBC documentary. It was perfectly pronounced and it was very clear and I understood all the words, but I felt like I lost a lot of the nuance of the emotions because it kind of got stuck in vocal patterns for quite a lot of the play, and I felt like we didn't go through the highs and lows of the emotions because of that from all of the performers.
Do you mean
actually.
almost like a radio drama?
A little
that kind
bit.
of thing, yes.
And at times, because it was so clear, and again, we didn't necessarily go into the nuance of the vocal emotions, it did come across because it's got the show has got a lot of points about feminism and kind of changing society. It did, because it was so clear. It did come across at times almost a bit like dramatic TED Talk.
Yes.
That might sound very negative, but actually that's the closest I can kind of liken it to. There was a higher level of emotion and physicality in their body and their physicalities than there was in their voice, and that for me, because I'm a very auditory person, did draw me out a little bit. So that's my director notes, I suppose.
I see what you're saying there. It's almost like it made it very static in a way, and I see what you mean. And it's funny how you mentioned about the story there as well, because this is opening around International Women's Day. It's interesting with the story that it's about women's empowerment, women's liberation, women's self-liberation, and the consequences of that, which I thought was fascinating. I'm still digesting that at the moment. What's the meaning and the purpose behind the story in that regard? I don't have a literary comment at the moment on that.
Okay. I was hoping for one.
No, I'm still digesting on the meaning and the purpose of it.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's around International Women's Day is quite poignant.
Yeah, and actually what I would say is that's maybe a positive from this particular play that I will take away, is that what they tried to do with part 2 was look at a very classic piece of text and flip it on its head, because it's saying, okay, yes, they got the women's rights and they got that, but what are the consequences? And not necessarily it's a good or a bad thing. I think it makes you have those questions afterwards, thinking, oh, did she actually want everything that she got? And was that where she wanted to go? Which will get me thinking.
It reminds me of the Rolling Stones, you can't always get what you want, but you get what you need.
Oh, what a great quote, Sam. How long have you been thinking of that one? The show is still set in the 1800s.
Yes.
And I want to know what you think about that, because for me, yes, we can look back at these things and we can still produce them in these times, but do audiences still relate when you're seeing that kind of period dress and period drama? What I loved about the set was it was a little bit modern, but yet we had the kind of period there as well. So it was like there was elements of modern there, but the story is still kind of rooted in that kind of period. How did that affect it for you?
Okay, what I'm going to say is let's break this down into several different segments, because we've got segments where it works and it doesn't.
Okay.
In my opinion, anyway.
Okay.
So, in terms of story, setting it in the 19th century, I'm going to go back to that idea of the emphasis of not having watched Doll's House 1 or things like that. That, in my mind, thinks, okay, you're taking a risk by doing part 2 with audiences maybe not knowing part 1. You're taking a risk. And yet, you didn't go all the way with that risk because you set it in the same period as Ibsen's original Dollhouse. So because I tell you why, TJ, looking at the original promotional material for this, it looked modern.
Yes, I agree.
There was the costume and the publicity photos, they were in modern costume, and yet we've had set it in a period, so it felt confusing in that regard. But what do you think from that perspective?
You know what, I was thinking, I was sat there and I was like, could we have taken a risk with this and done it in a way that was like the photo, and maybe it was a bit more that kind of modern theatre angle, and really taken it completely abstract and put it in a white room, or like really stripped it bare, or done something unique and different with it. That could have been another angle. I wouldn't say it didn't work, but I think, again, it is challenging for audiences to relate. And not that we shouldn't challenge audiences, I do want to say that now, because why should things be easy in theatre? They shouldn't always. We should be challenged. But at the end of the day, we have to walk out feeling that was a challenge I met, and that I've taken something away positive from it. And I don't think necessarily everybody from the theatre would have done that.
The question I asked myself is, was it playing it safe? But modernity was still within the play. For example, the costume. What did you think of Leonard Chu's costumes?
Leonard always is full of detail. His costumes are always stunning. I always appreciate that every time we watch a play that Leonard has costumed. It was very striking to me. I mean, because the set actually was kind of, and I don't mean this in a negative way, it was a blank canvas for the costumes to stand out even more. Actually, I think the set, we'll get onto that later, I think the set I actually really enjoyed. But the costumes really popped on that stage. And again, because we'd said it there, I appreciated that. I feel like we could have maybe been out of the box. I also could see another version where we were out of the box in terms of costume design, and making it more modern, like on the poster, would have been really interesting for me. A bit like we do sometimes with Shakespeare, and you reimagine it. That would have been really nice. But I think actually they were really beautiful and really detailed, as always.
I absolutely loved them. I think they were very chic, but they did have twists and touches of modernity. I think of Joe's costume, for example. Now, this is late 19th century. Ladies were not supposed to show their ankles in the 19th century. And yet, you can see a full-on boot with Joe. And I think that really complemented the freedom and independence of her character. And then Rebecca's costume was stunning. Absolutely stunning. Again, very tasteful, very chic, very period, but it's been twisted into a very
pink,
modern way. Yes,
yeah.
Both in terms of the fabric choices, the colours, the design of it. No, I really enjoyed costume. And Casey's waistcoat. Leonard, can you make me one as well? I absolutely loved his waistcoat. No, costume again was a real highlight for me. And as I said, it gave those little twists of modernity into the play as a whole.
I think, jumping onto my comment about set, actually the set, when we walked in, I remember I turned to you and I went, "Oh, that's interesting," and because the set kind of juts out a little bit into the audience. However, that front row, I don't believe those are restricted view tickets, but ladies and gentlemen, please do. I would not sit on the front row because the set is so close to you, and I did see the couple of people sat right next to the set really straining their neck, and one lady even moving, because that is very close, and I don't think they're restricted view. I might be wrong there, but yeah, for sure. But I think what I did love is actually reading the program. They did talk about how Ibsen likes to paint a picture, and I think that the way they did the backdrop, it was almost like this painting effect, and the painting that moved and evolved with the lighting, because I think that they really worked together with lighting there to make that backdrop come alive, and it moved through the time and the space, and as the emotions moved. So that collaboration, which Pang are always amazing at when it comes to the technical aspects of productions. I really enjoyed watching those details today. It is difficult though when the space doesn't have anything for the actors to interact with, because that requires the actors and the director to have basically an empty space and hold us with just the words and the text and the emotions. And at times I did feel like I would have appreciated a few more distractions to help tell the story.
Yes.
I think it works sometimes, but I did feel that was a bit empty from that perspective. But I'm sure that that's actually just a part of the play, and that because it's this empty house she's coming back to that's emptied since she's gone, and I'm sure it was very symbolic. But for me, it made the actor's job very difficult and not always achieved.
No, fair enough, and I couldn't agree with you more. For me, the set was simple, but I liked how it played with geometry and played with depth. It was very angular, but it did draw your attention always to that central door, and that door featured highly in the play. And it wasn't just a sort of single door; it was a double door that always opened double, so that grand entrance, that grand exit. But attention to detail, there was a light on the other side of the door that you could see very clearly, and it was on. And lighting for me was, again, great attention to detail. For me, how it played with time was through lighting. The sun, the early morning sun, and then as the play carried on, it went down and we're in night, and then the moon came up, and then it was white lights and then blue hues as well for the night. And it beautifully showed the continuation of time throughout the play, and I really, really appreciated that attention to detail.
James definitely is a fantastic lighting designer, as always. And I want to mention sound as well, because I actually think a lot of people might miss the detail that was in the sound, because there was a lot of subtle sounds that helped us with emotions that really just lingered in your ears, and those really helped to add to the drama that was going on stage. So again, Jing is just is so clever, and it's, you know, because we don't want it to distract in a play. In a musical, obviously we have sounds really clearly, but in a play, if that sound is done really well, you don't really notice it, but it really adds a lot. And I really enjoyed the sound today.
Yes. Now then, ladies and gentlemen, as you are probably aware by now, when TJ and I see a theatre production, after we have given our thoughts and our reviews, we always give a spoonful rating. That is out of 5 spoonfuls. But one thing to remember is that TJ and I never reveal how many spoonfuls we give until the moment has arrived. That moment is now. Are you ready, TJ?
I'm ready.
After the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, 2.
Now
we are matching, but we are matching on the lower end of the spectrum.
Absolutely.
Okay, TJ, as the practitioner, why are you a 2?
The last 15 minutes of our conversation, honestly. But for me, the thing I love about Pangdemonium is their tagline is kick-ass theatre. This period direction we've gone, and the overall feel of this show feels like a misstep. It feels like a wrong turn, and it doesn't feel like the kick-ass theatre that I know the audiences expect from Pangdemonium. That edgy, that something different that we can't find anywhere else in Singapore. This particular play and production and performance of this production didn't feel like that kick-ass theatre for me. What about you, Sam? Why a 2?
For me, it's a 2 simply because I didn't care. I unfortunately did not care about what I was seeing, and the character motivations and the character story, simply because I had very little context and was having to play catch up for that context, but it just did not give me enough to care about where the story was going. And you can see that they put a lot of hard work onto this performance. They've taken a risk. I think, unfortunately, it's been a misfire. But onwards and upwards. Now then, ladies and gentlemen, Pangdemonium's A Dollhouse Part 2 is playing at the Victoria Theatre until the 23rd of March. And where can they get their tickets, TJ?
So, Sam, tickets are actually available, not on Systic like usual, but over on bookmyshow.com, which is an up-and-coming platform, but it's obviously not the one that everybody knows. So please don't head to Systic. Go straight to bookmyshow.com, or you can go on Pangdemonium's website as well. So yeah, don't get that wrong, everybody.
Okay, now then, my tea's gone cold, love. Shall we leave it there?
Absolutely. Shall we go get something stronger?
Oh, what a Sunday afternoon. We've got school tomorrow.
Just the one.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, from us, that's cheerio. We'll be back soon.
And it's hurrah from me.
And to the cast and crew of Pangdemonium's A Dollhouse Part 2.
And to everyone else performing in Singapore Theatre for the next month,
break a leg.